All right, today we're going to dissect a pivotal moment in the Spanish Civil War, and we're going to do it through the lens of a single crucial document. This is Operations Order Number 12 from the Volunteer Troops Command, signed by General Mancini himself on March 4th, 1937. It's the complete battle plan for the Italian Corpo Truppe Volontarie, the C.T.V., for their offensive on Guadalajara.
Now, before we dive in, it's important to note that our briefing is derived entirely from the original documents and in-depth analysis provided by the Batallas Guerra Civil project. All the visual materials you're about to see come directly from their study, and full credit goes to them for this incredible material.
So, how are we going to break this down? First, we'll establish the big picture, the overall strategic context. Then, we'll get right into the commander's intent, understanding his purpose and concept for the operation. From there, we'll analyze the two main phases of the attack, the initial breach and the main advance. We'll also cover the absolutely vital support and reserve forces. And finally, we'll set the stage by examining the situation on the ground moments before the offensive began. The strategic situation here centered on a major offensive against Republican forces defending Madrid. The plan was a classic pincer movement, a two-pronged attack. One arm of the pincer would strike from the southwest, and the other, which is our focus today, was assigned to the Italian volunteer troops who were tasked with advancing from the northeast, right down the Sigüenza-Guadalajara axis.
The C.T.V's operational sector was very clearly defined by the terrain. You see, their right flank was bounded by the Badiel and Henares rivers, their left flank by the Tajuña River. And critically, they weren't going it alone. A Spanish brigade was slated to advance simultaneously on their right flank, providing security along the main highway.
In this quote from General Mancini, this gets right to the very heart of his plan. His intent is absolutely unmistakable. It's built on three pillars: speed, the most direct route possible, and seizing Guadalajara in the shortest possible time. You have to understand, this obsession with tempo is the key to this entire operation.
So how did he translate that intent into a workable concept? It was simple, aggressive, and had two parts. First, a violent and rapid breach of the enemy's front lines. Then, without a moment's pause, a fully motorized force was to pour through that gap and drive straight for Guadalajara. The whole scheme was designed for one thing, and one thing only: continuous, unstoppable forward momentum.
Okay, let's look at Phase 1, the breach action. This critical task was given to the 2nd Volunteer Division, and they were heavily reinforced for the job with extra infantry, tanks, and artillery. Their mission was straightforward and brutal: overwhelm the defenses and seize that initial objective line. This was the sledgehammer designed to smash the door wide open.
The tactical execution was timed to the minute. On the morning of the attack, the 2nd Division was to conduct a passage of lines through friendly Spanish troops at 0630. This would be preceded by a massive 30-minute artillery barrage from 7 to 7:30. We're talking everything from divisional to corps-level artillery pounding known enemy positions. Once that breach was secured, Phase 2 would kick in immediately: the main advance. A fully motorized force, built around the 3rd Volunteer Division, had to be ready to exploit the opening by 0930. Their mission: race through that gap, seize Guadalajara, and if possible, establish a secure bridgehead on the far side of the Henares River. This was designed to be the knockout blow.
But the 2nd Division's work wasn't done after the breach. Not at all. Once the 3rd Division had passed through them, the 2nd had to immediately reorient. Their follow-on mission was to protect the left flank of that advancing motorized column, an absolutely critical task to prevent counterattacks. This also included relieving elements of the 3rd Division in Brihuega to secure that vital crossing over the Tajuña River.
Now let's turn to the supporting forces. Operating in coordination with the main Italian thrust was the Spanish Soria Division. They had a twofold mission. First, to clear any enemy forces from the zone between the Spanish brigades, and second, to pose a threat to Madrid's lines of communication to the north. This would create a much wider problem for the Republican command to deal with.
The Soria Division's supporting attack was broken down into 4 pretty ambitious phases. You can see they were tasked with taking successive lines of objectives, pushing steadily westward. But the key detail here is the tempo. The plan demanded that each one of these phases be completed in a single day. That's a very aggressive timetable.
And this map here really lays out those daily objectives geographically. You can see the plan for a systematic 4-day push to the west. This advance was specifically designed to move in lockstep with the main Italian attack.
constantly widening the breach and securing the northern flank of the entire offensive.
Of course, no operational plan is worth its salt without its powerful reserve, and General Mancini held back significant forces. We're talking the Littorio Volunteer Division, the 1st Volunteer Division, an extra infantry battalion, and 2 companies of fast tanks. The Littorio was to be staged in Medinaceli by noon on day X, with the 1st Division ready in Sigüenza. Command posts were also pushed well forward to maintain control over what was expected to be a very fast-moving battle.
So finally, let's assess the situation on the eve of the attack, starting with the intelligence picture. These 9 towns and villages were identified as the main centers of enemy resistance. They effectively formed the backbone of the Republican defensive line that the C.T.V was preparing to smash. This map gives us a good overview of how those defensive strong points were laid out on the ground. It was precisely this defensive network held by the Republican 12th Division that the 2nd Volunteer Division's breach action was specifically engineered to shatter in the opening hours of the offensive.
Now, this is absolutely crucial. Republican attention was focused completely somewhere else. Just 2 days before the Guadalajara offensive was set to launch, on March 6th, the Republican commander of the Madrid Army Corps issued orders for an attack on the Jarama front, south of Madrid. This shows a total misreading of nationalist intentions. The Republican command was preoccupied with the direct defense of the capital.
And this timeline of the final hours is incredibly telling. While the Republican command is issuing repeated warnings about a direct attack on Madrid, the Nationalists are finalizing their actual plan for Guadalajara. General Rada returns to take command, Mancini signs the order, and on the morning of March 7th, Franco gives his final instructions. But that very afternoon, a critical, unforeseen variable enters the equation. The weather completely turns, with heavy rain and snow beginning to fall.
This final map tells the whole story. On one side, you have the C.T.V, concentrated and poised to strike a weak, unprepared sector. On the other, all Republican attention is fixated on the direct defense of Madrid. The result? The Nationalists achieved complete and total operational surprise. The stage was set.
And that brings us to the final pivotal question. The plan was meticulous. The forces were in position. The enemy was looking the wrong way. But the entire concept hinged on rapid movement by a motorized force. So, the question remains, could an offensive built entirely on speed possibly succeed against the sudden onset of severe winter weather?
For a complete operational history of the Guadalajara campaign and for further analysis of the Spanish Civil War, we highly recommend consulting the comprehensive project available at batallasguerracivil.es. This concludes our briefing.